Good day, everybody. Zack here, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider, where we learn about motorcycles as we ride. Our guest today is the Honda NT1100. Very basically, that's an Africa Twin 1100 adventure bike that has been lowered and redesigned and restyled for use on pavement. It also has a lowered and redesigned MSRP of $12,000. And I feel like I know what you're thinking. Of course, Zack would be excited about this bike with a big thumping twin-cylinder engine and adjustable wind protection, Apple CarPlay, and an automatic transmission. He probably thinks it's the perfect commuter. And I'll admit, on paper, it looks pretty good. But, of course, the big question, as always, is it any good? Well, let's ride to work and talk about it, shall we? All right. Oh, right, everybody, before we get going on this NT1100 Daily Rider, a quick reminder, the sponsor of this episode is, of course, the YouTube channel that you are watching, RevZilla. But, of course, RevZilla doesn't make money on this YouTube channel, really. The way RevZilla makes money is by selling things for motorcycles and people who love them. So the next time you need tires, aftermarket saddlebags, an aftermarket seat, helmet, jacket, whatever, oil, chain cleaner, if and when you spend that money at RevZilla, a little bit goes into funding programs like this. That's the whole message. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Hokey doke, NT1100. We can start with the engine as usual. This is a 1084cc. I believe it's listed on the website as a parallel twin liquid cooled 270 crank, which means the pistons go up and down like this, thumpata, 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 which you'll hear it go with thumpata, thumpata, thumpata when we fire it up. You'll see it listed as a 22.5 degree parallel twin or something like that. And I think all Honda's talking about is that instead of being completely vertical, it is tipped forward just a little bit, whereas say its cousin in the Honda lineup, the NC750, has a parallel twin, but it's laid way down. It's like a 70 degree parallel twin. So they're just talking about how upright or not these cylinders are. The other notable item on this bike is the dual clutch transmission, which you can see the badge for right there, or DCT, which means the bike shifts without a shifter pedal. It does it automatically if you want, or you can do it manually with some buttons on the handlebar that we will play with in a minute. Structurally, this engine and frame are the same as the Africa Twin 1100 that I mentioned before. Aside from that, it's all new componentry. The suspension is not particularly adjustable. I think it's just preload in the fork and preload and maybe rebound damping in the shock. You get about 6 inches of travel instead of the 9 inches of travel you'd get with an Africa Twin, or around 8 inches with the Adventure Sports. And you get 17-inch wheels, and of course you get this sort of sleek sport touring bodywork, which I'll let you decide whether or not you think it looks good, but it certainly looks different than an Africa Twin, even though the core of the bike is very much the same. A couple of other things I should call out while we're standing next to the bike. One, the saddlebags, which are not included in the MSRP. Those are around $1,000, and oddly, if you want these blue panels to go along with your Hawkeye blue paint on your NT1100, it'll be an extra $200. So if you want them in matte black, you can have them for about $1,000. If you want the blue panels for the matchy-matchy, it's going to cost you about $1,200 for those saddlebags. They are matched to the ignition key, and they clip off real easy, and they're clamshell, which is kind of annoying, but they are pretty good saddlebags in general. I'm just sort of calling that out because we're probably not going to talk much about them as we ride. One other thing I'd like to talk about is some of the switch gear, because it's fairly complicated. As you can see, it has a lot of buttons. My buddy Dustin wrote an article about this bike when it first came out. The article is linked in the description of this video, and I think he said, I forget if he said there were 17 buttons total, or 22 or something. It's a lot. So I'll call this keypad out to you before we get going, in part because I want to show you how you upshift, which is this little plus trigger over here, which, you know, when you have your hand on the bar, works with your index finger, but you're not going to be able to see it when I'm riding. So there's that little fella right there. Also, this sort of interesting wind protection setup. This is adjustable, which we'll play with as we ride, but there's also these like weird kind of flaps that stick out. Clearly very engineered and designed to push air away from the rider's hands and arms, but kind of curious when you're up close. It's very alien life form when you're sort of looking at it when you're not riding. All right, I think that's just about it. Nothing particularly interesting to call out about the seat or anything like that, I don't think. I think we can just fire up this big old touchscreen TFT. It's, of course, paired with a little LCD down here because with Apple CarPlay functionality, if this is in Apple CarPlay, then you need to see your speed and gear position and stuff like that. All right, let's fire this sucker up, shall we? I like the way this engine sounds a lot. Got a nice kind of bassy, authoritative tone to it. What did I forget to talk about? Anything? Well, I'm sure we'll cover it when we ride, right? Of course. How could I forget anything? All right, there we go. All right, now if we were parked on a hill, we would have had this engaged, the parking brake, but we're not on a hill, so we can leave that disengaged. And the NT1100 only comes in Hawkeye Blue, and it only comes with a DCT, which means to put it in gear, you're gonna press here into D, and you're gonna hear the thing go clunk. And then you'll see a D up here on the dashboard. 2 of them, in fact. And I think with that, we are ready to ride to work. I'm gonna start with this sucker all the way down. Off we go, everybody. All right, now that we're rolling, we can talk about specs a little bit. I said the MSRP is $12,000, actually $11,899, about $100 shy of $12,000. And with the saddlebags on the back there, it's a little over $13,000 as the bike is being ridden. On the daily rider scales, with a full 5.4 gallons of fuel in the tank, the NT1100 weighed in at 551 pounds, which is no featherweight, I suppose you could say. And the seat height is 32.3 inches, which is just about average. I don't know, I always think 32 inches is a pretty average seat height. And yeah, I would say it feels pretty average. It does feel like a pretty big bike to sit on, predictably, 550 pounds, and you know, some substantial body work and that kind of thing. Definitely feels like a full-size machine, but it is not especially intimidating, and that is, of course, kind of the point. As for horsepower and torque, I don't think that Honda actually makes a claim for this bike or the Africa Twin, but if you look it up, you're going to find Africa Twin power numbers to be around 100 horsepower, I think, and like 80 foot-pounds of torque, something like that. It's pretty good. Oh man, our ramp is closed. Son of a peach. All right, time for a detour, everybody. I've done this enough times now, you'd think I'd know where I was going, but I do not. So all of that is to say, fairly average set of specs on the old NT1100. Heavier than your average regular motorcycle, I would say, but feels fairly normal to sit on. Doesn't have a ton of horsepower, but it has enough to keep you entertained, etc., etc. All right, I think this is where I turn. But at any rate, this is a good time to point out that this NT1100 does have Apple CarPlay compatibility, but it is not wireless. Those of you who watched the Gold Wing 50th Anniversary Edition Daily Rider will remember that I had my iPhone in my pocket and Apple CarPlay came up on the screen, just like a sort of sophisticated automobile of this day and age. But the NT1100 does not do that for some reason. It was a different point in the development cycle when that technology came into Honda's hands or whatever, so it doesn't do that. And that means you have to plug it into this USB port here, which is provided, and that's nice and everything. But then you either have to run the cord into your pocket or you put your phone mounted on the handlebar. But if you're going to mount the phone on the handlebar, then wouldn't you just use your phone for navigation anyway, and then just use this dash for that? And then why do we have 2 dashes? And I don't know, I just found the whole thing kind of clunky, and I guess just not as satisfying as the Gold Wing. Granted, the Gold Wing's a $30,000 bike and this is a $12,000 bike, so like, I get it, but it just felt like something was missing. When this is in Apple CarPlay mode, this dash doesn't seem like enough, and it's too hard to get it into Apple CarPlay mode as far as I'm concerned. So I was a little bit uninspired, and I find myself just riding like this and not worrying about the Apple CarPlay thing because I didn't want to bother. All right, back on track, everybody. And now we can talk about highway manners, which is, of course, one of the things that the NT ought to be pretty darn good at. And now that we're going 70 miles an hour, I gotta say the first thing I want to do is put the windscreen up because it's quite loud for me like this. I appreciate that I can put the windscreen way down and get quite a bit of air on my helmet and a little bit on my shoulders. It's nice, but it dumps air right at the bottom of the helmet. I don't really like it that much. We can go all the way up to begin with. Ooh. It's probably a little bit quieter for you now, but actually with the windscreen all the way up like this, it really creates quite a bit of turbulence around my helmet at this point. It just sort of like shakes my dome, like my helmet's attached to the motor mounts and just kind of vibrating, which I don't really like. I like it kind of midway down here. Oh, see what I can do. Yeah, like that's kind of nice for me. Pushes air up to the top of my helmet, so it keeps the sort of turbulent air away from the bottom and a little bit quieter. I guess where I'm going with this is I appreciate the adjustability. and it's significant. It's not one of those windscreens that goes up or down this much and you think, I can't even tell the difference. It's like there are big swings in the wind protection adjustability, which is as it should be. And perhaps not surprisingly, once you do settle into riding like this, the NT1100 is really quite good. It's got a nice riding position. You're upright, your feet just beneath your knees or your thighs. It's a little bit sporty, but really not very. It's extremely comfortable. The seat is very thick. It's a little narrow at the front, which I find kind of odd. I always find myself kind of like pushed forward in the seat a little bit in a way that I don't quite agree with, but in general, it's very hard to complain about the accommodations here. Just feels like you could do this for hours or days or weeks or however long you want your road trip to be. As far as how far you will make it between fuel stops, pretty far. I think I've been averaging like mid-40s, between 42 and 45 mostly. In fact, you can see average for this trip I think is 42. With that, you will, with 5.4, almost 5.5 gallons of gas, you're going to go pretty far. I appreciate that Honda didn't overlook that aspect of this motorcycle. And if you think I'm just sort of, you know, fluffing Honda for no reason, keep in mind the base Africa Twin has a 5-gallon tank. Granted, that's not that much less, but Honda, in designing the NT1100 and bringing it to market, added fuel capacity compared to the base Africa Twin, which again, I appreciate. Not as much fuel capacity as the Africa Twin Adventure Sports, which has a much bigger tank, I think 6.6 or something like that. The mirrors are good too, by the way, as Honda mirrors often are. Everything's just good. Life is good right now. All right, as we head into the Suburban Neighborhood Challenge, I'm going to put this down just one rung, because at low speed I kind of prefer that. And we'll see if we can get some footless stops here, everybody. What do you think? Automatic transmission, don't need to worry about clutch feel whatsoever. Look at that, nice rollback 0 mph footless stop. I think that's indicative of the clutch tuning and general usability of Honda's DCT. It's become quite good over the years. It's been around for a decade or more than maybe 15 years now, and it's pretty darn easy to use and easy to like. I will say, as I go for my second footless stop, I got it. I have it in D mode here, and if we go down to this button here, I can press D again, and it'll go to S for Sport. As you can see, there are 3 different settings of Sport that control the aggression of the shifting. I prefer the least aggressive version of Sport. We can play around with some of the other modes a little bit later on, but this just means the transmission sort of chooses to, oop, I screwed that one up. The transmission chooses to shift, let the engine rev a little bit higher before it shifts, I should say, and downshift slightly more aggressively as you decelerate. So there is some adjustability in the automatic transmission, which I appreciate. But I suppose while we're on the topic, you might be questioning why I have not talked about the automatic transmission up to this point, and I would tell you that I just kind of forget about it, you know? Like if this is the bike that you love to hate because it has an automatic transmission and you think like, I want to shift my bike, I like a clutch and I want to feel a transmission, absolutely, totally cool. This bike is not for you, right? It doesn't even come in a manual option. But for me, when I jump on it, I kind of forget about that. And I think I'm riding a DCT bike, I'm not going to shift myself, and I'm going to embrace it. And I kind of get used to it. I like it. I mean, I think it does what it does so well that I find it really difficult to dislike, or at the very least not appreciate what it delivers to the world of motorcycling. Because I just mentioned it, I can show you, so if I tap on this, you see the Sport mode. Well, if you hold it, sorry, it go to setting 1, setting 2, or setting 3 in Sport. So we'll leave it in setting 3 as we leave this traffic light, and you can see it'll hold the revs longer before it shifts. Away we go. It's just such an effortless engine. So you see now I'm like sort of cruising along and I'm decelerating, and it's still in 3rd gear where it would have upshifted long ago in one of the other modes. So I'm going to go back down to Sport 1. The thing it doesn't do quite aggressively enough in any of the sport modes in my mind is downshift quickly enough when decelerating. So I often tap the minus button just so I get those cool auto blip downshifts. I think the engine sounds great and I like the feel of more engine braking. And again, in my long list of things I appreciate about this bike and what Honda did, I like that even in automatic transmission mode you can suggest when you want it to shift. You just tell it, no, I want you to downshift now, and it'll do it, which is nice. Overall thoughts on the NT1100 around town. Really, really good. Quiet, polite, powerful, authoritative, easy, really great bike. One thing I'll say that I didn't talk about, I should have, is the throttle pickup is imperfect. I actually think the clutch engagement and the way that the DCT feeds power from the engine into the drivetrain as you leave a stop or something like that is really, really good. What I find to be a little clunky is the on-off fueling, which is, again, common in 2025 for motorcycles because of whatever the reasons are. But it's a little disappointing. And the main reason that I find myself sad about it is that I don't want people to think that it's a DCT that's doing that lurchy thing. I actually think that it's throttle response and tuning rather than the transmission, which I think is largely in a perfect state of tune. Lover's Lane here. We can set the cruise control 32 miles per hour. And we can talk about passenger accommodations. I'll just scoot back and kind of pop back here for a second. And I don't know, man. Plush, wide, thick, pretty good legroom. There is also a distinct lack of a problem, which many bikes struggle with, which is that the heel of the passenger will hit the saddlebag. And that does not happen on this bike. I think that that's notable. Little stuff like this can seem pretty unimportant. And if you're not going to buy saddlebags or you don't care, then you don't care. I think it shows a lot of care and engineering, and it's one of the almost intangible things that seems really difficult to quantify with bikes like Honda or, you know, other whatever reputable brands that do a good job engineering their motorcycles that can fly under the radar, but I find myself really liking, or what's the word I've been using? Appreciating. Okie doke. Into the Twisty Road section, everybody. And what do I always say about big 21-inch wheel adventure bikes when it comes to the Twisty Road? They can be better than you think, right? More planted, more fun. And this bike is based on a big 21-inch front wheel adventure bike, but of course it's got lower suspension, it has a 17-inch wheel set, and so I think you gain a lot from that. It's like, it feels agile and direct. I mean, for a bike that weighs 550 pounds, right? It's not a sport bike. The one place where the NT kind of misses for me is suspension refinement. It feels kind of cheap when you hit a sharp bump or you hit a little set of bumps. They'll rattle your wrist and it upsets the bike just a little bit. Or if you hit undulating bumps in the middle of a corner and you're kind of carrying some speed, it'll like dip and weave and wallow a little bit. It's nothing dangerous or ridiculous. It just, you can tell that it's not a super sporty bike, and maybe that's obvious from looking at the spec chart or whatever, but I think it's fair to call out that this bike is based on an Africa Twin, which will do this just as well. I think go down a twisty road on pavement. An Africa Twin's a perfectly good bike to do that on, and of course an Africa Twin, you can take it down a dirt trail, you can jump it off a water bar, you can do much more with an Africa Twin than you can with this bike, and that's sort of where the few $1,000 price difference comes in. I think it sort of might just look like an ADV tax to get an Africa Twin for $15,000 or this thing for $12,000, but the capability, the versatility, and the refinement that you get in Africa Twin suspension to me is one of the biggest differentiators practically as far as how it will feel when you actually use each of the two machines. All right, we come to the bottom of the Twisty Road here. I'm gonna trigger some downshifts and see if we can hear this engine. I like it. Very satisfying. Satisfying pull of power too. Right, red light, which means we talk about brakes. See if we can get into the ABS here. Yeah, good brakes. Not like super impressive equipment up there. I think they're just like Nissan 4-pot calipers and rubber lines and whatever. And it's a big heavy bike, but it's adequate without being stunning, I would say. All right, let's go NT1100. Whoa! Okay, upshift. You're good. I could spend a lot of time on this dash. It's kind of complicated. Well, first of all, it's a little bit of secret handshake. You pull down on this little tab here, and then you get to this menu. And from this menu, you can use the up-down buttons to jump around, and you press enter, and you can get into settings. And then if you're looking for Bluetooth, you'd be like, where is it? Is it in, oh, it's down, there's a scroll. Okay, I got that. The thing that really kind of bugs me about this is that you can see it's up, down, and there's a left, right, but the left, right doesn't always really do anything. You need to press enter to enter a menu. and you need to press back to get back. I think back should be back here, back, and then you press enter. And I find myself mixing that up. And then also, like, when you go back to the main menu screen here and you press back, you can't get back. It doesn't go back. You have to scroll up and select riding information to get back to the, like, why can't I just, I don't know. And it's got like all the music and Apple CarPlay stuff and volume, and it isn't quite right, I don't think. You can scroll through a bunch of information over here with the little left-right tab doodle here. You can go to trip A, trip B, you know, see battery voltage and adjust traction control and that kind of thing. And you can set favorites for adjustability. For example, I have my traction control set as the favorite, which is this star button here. So if I tap it, it will reduce traction control to setting 2. If I tap it again, it'll reduce it to traction control setting 1, which we'll play with in the dirt for a minute here. I guess what I'm saying is there's nothing really wrong with the whole interface, except that I don't like it. I should say you can also change ride modes, and when you do that, sometimes the actual, the dash changes too. So you can do like a simple looking dash here without all the mumbo jumbo. And yeah, there's some adjustability here. There's rain mode. What else is there? Urban. Oh, I actually kind of like the urban one. Go to urban again, Zach. Yeah. Kind of cool. Little analog dasher thingy, and then, I don't know, whatever. It's not enough cool to make me happy about how it all works. All right, well, all that is to say, how come we haven't talked about the engine more, Zach? This is where you talk about the engine. I love this engine. I think it's a great power plant. I think it's real usable and pleasant and sounds cool and all that stuff. I think what Honda did was look at its own lineup and think, what if someone wants all the usability, all of the capability of an Africa Twin engine, but they don't want the tall seat height, they don't want 8 or 9 inches of suspension travel, they just want that core thing. Because it offers another vehicle, literally and figuratively, to getting your hands on this engine in a way that is less adventurous if you don't care about that, then yeah, I suppose I could see buying this bike just because you want access to that sort of lovely big engine that Honda's put all that effort into. So, what was the question that I asked at the beginning? I basically said, is it any good, right? Ultimately, yes. I think it's really, really good. I think it's a good bike. I think that this bike has a lot of potential to get completely lost in the encyclopedia of Honda models that the company has experimented with over the years that people don't even remember because they've had so many, and it might fade into obscurity because not very many people buy it. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But like so many of Honda's sort of, if you will, experimental models, it's amazingly well thought out, and it's really good as a motorcycle. Watch, I can even kick this ball out of this intersection. Soccer ball. I saved you. Hope you appreciate that. As a piece of engineering and as an actual machine to use to get to work or to another city or across the country, I think that people are going to find it to be really satisfying, and there aren't really very many misses on the design or engineering side. If you don't think it's cool enough for you, then you can move on. But maybe after you see it go down a dirt road, then you'll be impressed. All right, so here we are, and here's what I'll say. I did adjust the traction control earlier down to level 1. I'm going to put it back in level 3 in user 2 mode. I'm just going to leave it in tour because it's fine, that's all I need. You may have noticed the traction control light blinking a couple times on pavement. It's very, very conservative, and I'm curious to see what happens in the dirt here. So let's punch it. Whoa. It allows you to accelerate a little bit. If you go too far, though, it basically completely cuts power. Ugh. You see that? It's wide open, right? So I open the throttle and you hear it go, and then it'll just cut power, and I'll leave the throttle pinned. And then it slowly feeds power back in. I think it underestimates or underappreciates what the rider of this bike is going to be and is going to want. I don't know, like, I get if you want safety as your utmost concern, sure, fine, but even in traction control 1, it's just like, there's just no life to the thing at all. And I guess I don't see why you wouldn't just create a little bit of leniency in there. I'm not sure what the downside would be. Is there a downside? Maybe there is. Maybe this is me bumping up against the edge of what this bike is versus what I want it to be, you know? You need to accept that the bike is what it is and isn't necessarily going to change for you. Okay, can I shut it off though? I think I can. Let me go down here. Can I shut it off? I'm going to shut it off. There we go. TC off. Now, let's see if we can peel out of this intersection. Traction control's off. Excitable little fella. Okay, speaking of excitable, can we do a wheelie? Let's see. Down to first gear, TC off. Whoa, hey. Did you see that? That was a bigger wheelie than I thought. Okay, it won't do it in second. Whoa, we even got a little automatic shift. All right, it's the first wheelie I've attempted, and it probably showed. All right, can you back it in? I suppose that's a question we could ask. I don't think so. Let's grab some downshifts and see what happens now. It really just decelerated, felt quite planted. No manual clutch control is always going to be a little bit of a kiss of death for hooning around supermoto style. But I've been impressed with the spunkiness available with the NT. I didn't see some of that coming. And I think because it's largely an Africa Twin chassis, we're gonna have pretty good luck with the old U-turn challenge. Oh, uh-oh. We're not gonna have that much luck. We only have about a parking space to do it in. Dang, that's too bad. I was looking forward to seeing what this baby would do. Well, we're gonna cheat it a little bit so we can actually find out. We'll line up close to this line here, and then we're gonna, I screwed it up. And then we're gonna go full lock to the left, feet up. Oop. Yeah, less than 2 parking spaces. Nice tight U-turn, you know? Again, Honda can't help itself. What a capable and obedient machine this is. Oops, I probably put neutral. You put neutral before you put the kickstand down, because when you put the kickstand down in gear, that kind of makes sense, right? All right, have you heard enough of this engine already? Well, we're gonna listen to it one more time because Zach likes it. I mean, it's got like a, you know, the 270 cranks got a lot of sort of 90-degree V-twin energy, of course, because that's kind of the point. And I don't know, this bike gives me like dorky Ducati ST4 energy, you know, or ST3 energy maybe. Yeah, it's like obviously not sexy and Italian, but like it's got a lot of presence. It's got a lot of character and kind of soul or fortitude when you use it that it doesn't necessarily show on the kickstand, I don't think. Anyway, that was fun. Thanks for coming along. Let's see what you all had to say in the old Instagram question section. All right, so first question we have here from the internets is from Ty Longmire 36, who says, is this closer to the Africa Twin in terms of excitement / character? I was just talking about character. On the street, or more like the NC750's older sibling? This is a good question. So I mentioned the NC750 earlier when I was talking about the engine, and the NC750 is like a very, very engineered concept, right? It has that laid down engine, which means you get a frunk where the gas tank should be. The gas tank is under the seat. It's very low revving. It's very high efficiency. You can get it in DCT. You can get it in manual. It is a very kind of specific product. And the Africa Twin is maybe more conventional. It's a tall ADV bike with this engine and frame. I think this bike is kind of a blend of the two. You know, to create the 10-pound motorcycle, if you will, I think it took 6 pounds of Africa Twin and 4 pounds of NC750 and kind of blended them a little bit. And I know that like the styling is not the same across the board and that kind of thing. But yeah, it does have an NC750 feel because of the DCT and because it's very much designed for the road. In studying Honda's website and spec sheets between all the bikes, NC750, Africa Twin Adventure Sports, Goldwing, NT1100, I did see a big hole in Honda's lineup between the NC750, which is like $9,800, like 10 grand, 9,500 bucks, 10 grand, something like that, and then a $15,000 Africa Twin. And you know, where do you go in between there if you don't want a Transalp? This answers that question. And I think it answers it pretty well, or comprehensively, I guess. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I hope that helps. So I just mentioned the Goldwing, and the next question I'm going to answer is from Toth Jason, who says, I'd love a Goldwing, but not 900 pounds. 852 pounds, Toth Jason, be nice. Is this a more nimble, lighter Goldwing style of bike? Kind of, except that, what the Goldwing is ultimately is very much a touring bike. And I think sometimes people get touring and sport touring confused because the sport touring category is kind of dying off. We don't really see the Yamaha FGR 1300s like publicized or talked about, or Kawasaki Concourse 14, or help me here, whatever. Classic sport touring motorcycles. The Goldwing is a touring motorcycle, no sport, that is actually surprisingly sporty for what it is, but it is a touring motorcycle. This is definitely a more nimble, lighter motorcycle. Is it a Goldwing type of bike? No. I think it's a much more conventional sport tourer as we knew it 10, 20 years ago. I think that separates it from the Goldwing, not just in price, but in character and feel. Next question is from Klibin Missile, who says, would you rather have the DCT or the E-clutch? Right. So this question is in reference to Honda's E-clutch, which comes on the CB650 and CBR650, I believe, and maybe it's transitioning to other models by the time you watch this video. I'm not actually sure. But what that is basically a conventional transmission that you shift with your foot and you have a clutch lever, but Honda has designed a system whereby you don't have to use the clutch. You can just push down in first gear. It will engage the clutch for you. You can hit the throttle and it will accelerate for you without you having to use the clutch whatsoever. You can either use the lever or not. So it's sort of more of a bolt-on system to a conventional motorcycle that's heavily computerized rather than an entire separate transmission that has two clutches and is much more involved from an engineering standpoint. I think that if Honda did not already have an Africa Twin DCT and had spent so much time with that power plant and creating a DCT variant, then this would be a perfect application for that system, because I think being able to quick shift with your foot and having a clutch lever to use if you wanted to would satisfy some of the sport touring crowd. But I think the fact that this power plant already existed with a DCT was sort of an obvious thing for Honda to just say, we're going to put the DCT in there because it already exists and it suits the sort of character and personality that we're going for with this machine. To answer your question as succinctly as possible, I prefer the E-clutch, actually. But I appreciate so much what the DCT is and how sophisticated and refined it is. It makes the bike feel higher quality than just having a system on there that makes you not have to use the clutch. Last question here is from a Small Factory, who says, seems like a great bike at a great price. What features should I complain on the internet about? I love this comment, or question, I suppose, because yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I got too. I made some comment earlier in the ride where I said something like, oh, it's the brakes, I think, right? I said they're adequate, even if they're not stunning. That's a pretty good review of this bike. And I think that sounds like I'm being so kind of like snide or glib and passing over this bike in my mind as something that's not important or interesting. But it really is the ultimate compliment, because I think that's what this bike is supposed to be. I don't think that Honda is putting out an 1100cc Africa Twin engine and frame with an automatic transmission in a bike that's styled to look sort of sleek and, dare I say, from some angles kind of scooterish. I don't think they're going for stunning. I think they're going for a bike that just works. It's really, really, really hard to argue that this bike doesn't work. It's pretty good. Aside from the user interface stuff that annoyed me, and what else was there? Anything? Oh, the expensive saddlebag panels. I really struggle to find flaws in the design and in the build. I think that it does what it's supposed to do extremely well. Sorry, I got distracted. I didn't really answer your question. What was it again? Oh yeah, what were you supposed to complain about? It only comes in blue? What's that? Is it a absolutely beautiful blue when you get up close? It's got all this like metal flake in it. Can you see the sort of sparkle to it? And but it only comes in blue. Come on, Honda, you're big red. There should be a red one. I know, it's a flimsy argument. It's a good bike. All right, let's put it on the Daily Rider leaderboard and I can let you go.
Okie dokie, everybody. Here we are at the Daily Rider leaderboard, ready to put the old Honda NT1100. As a reminder of where we stand at this point in 2025, at the top of the leaderboard we have the CF Moto Ibex 450 adventure bike, awfully good Daily Rider I have to say. The Husqvarna Svartpillen 801 and Yamaha MT09 on the podium, as well as some other bikes. What do you think about the Honda NT1100? Really good Daily Rider, right? What does Daily Rider mean, Zach? Does it mean it's great at stirring your soul, or does it mean it's great for getting to work? Well, it's always complicated, isn't it? And I suppose it's a tricky thing to balance because this is always where the subjectivity of how I feel about a bike and the objectivity of how it actually literally performs and hits its own design brief comes into play. With that being said, I think you could make a strong argument that the NT1100 goes to the top of the board, right? Is it a better daily rider than a CF Moto Ibex 450? I mean, it's more comfortable. You know, it has the advantage of a automatic transmission, if you want to see it that way. It's got Apple CarPlay and electronic features, really good adjustable wind protection. It's a much more refined, luxurious experience than a $6,500 Chinese adventure bike, certainly. I think you could also make the argument that it doesn't have the versatility or chutzpah or character that these adventure bikes have. The Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 and the KTM 390 Adventure R. I can't see how you'd ever rank an NT1100 below an R9 if you're being honest with yourself. So you can make an argument that it goes here. You can make an argument that it goes here. I think it's going to go somewhere in the middle here. So how do we iron this out? Is it better than Husqvarna Svartpilen 801? This bike is just so kind of like compact and distilled and punchy and fun, and it just feels relevant and present and capable in just about any situation you put it in, even though it doesn't have, you know, a lot of dirt capability or a lot of touring capability. It just feels like such a enjoyable bike. Would you have a Yamaha MT09 instead of an NT1100? Yes? Okay. Next question. Would you recommend, as a daily rider, as a way to get to work, a Yamaha MT09 instead of an NT1100 to someone that you didn't know anything about their bank account, age, inseam, riding ability? That's tough. I'm going to go no. I'm going to go no. I'm going to give some credit to motorcycles like the Svartpilen 801 and the MT09, which to me connect the experience of riding a motorcycle with usability and practicality in a way that feels special and a little bit effervescent. As much as I appreciate, there's that word again, the Honda NT1100 for what it is and what it does and how it works, it is ultimately a little bit clinical and serious compared to a lot of these other bikes. So that's what I'm going with. If you've come along with me this far on the daily ride, I'll just say thank you so much for hanging out. I really did enjoy riding that motorcycle. I think it's one that I'll think about more than most. And in the meantime, I hope you learned something, had fun, and will revisit us here on Daily Rider. See you, everybody.
Whistle in the helmet. Don't ever whistle in the helmet when you have a microphone. It's a good little piece of etiquette. So, you know, if you're on headsets, no whistling, no humming. It's annoying for everyone. I should know better. I just got Beach Boys stuck in my head. Love the Beach Boys.